So, hi John, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, James? Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, no problem at all, John. Great to see you again. So, for people who are watching or listening, could you give a little intro to you and kind of a bit of your background as well?
Yeah, sure. Uh, I was someone as a kid always interested in science and less technology then because we didn't have as much. Um, and I ended up going to school at Penn State doing a biochemistry degree, and then I got out and did forensics for a little bit. I was very fascinated with forensic science. Did that for a bunch of years, and then went into a startup in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, creating drugs of abuse diagnostic kits and saliva alcohol testing and things like that. Cool company. And then after that, I went to Merck, and in between there, I started my own little startup company with another person, and that was all around. The name of it was Avicon, agricultural, veterinary, and environmental testing. And I sold that company to my partner, I don't know, 6 months, a year after that, and just focused at Merck, where I got heavily involved. I was in the lab, got out of the lab, and then started doing informatics work, and um, and then went into the computational chemistry side of things, methods development, and that's where I got my first introduction to machine learning. I had a huge interest in machine learning, and I think I saw how it could really change the world, um, like an in silico first or a model first approach to science. And at the time, Merck was one of the companies on the forefront of that. We had the money, we had the big computers. These are $20 million Crays, $20 million at the time. This is
Yeah.
early 2000s supercomputers, high performance computing. And so we had a lot of success with that, even though I don't think the change management part of it was tough. We had chemists saying, "Hey, don't tell me what molecules to make," and things like that. And we learned
Yeah.
from that, and so we adjusted and modified how we approach things and did things. But I knew back then that we had a data problem. And Merck actually was on the forefront of data as an asset and things like that in the 90s. But with the financial issues that we had, the economy issues with the crash we had in the late 90s, early 2000s, um, things got a little wobbly, and so things got started to get more complex too, and the data side of the house started to get a little messier. And this is all pharmas. Um, I ended up getting my master's in there from Lehigh, in molecular and cellular biology. Um, and then, just at that point decided, hey, I need to be more of a data evangelist, scientific data evangelist. And that's where I left Merck. I went to GlaxoSmithKline, became a director in their discovery informatics, chem informatics group, and spent a couple years there. GSK implodes every couple years, so I was out. They got rid of most of the VPs in research when retired. I went to Acceleris software company, scientific software company, and spent 8 years developing solutions for clients all around the world. Life sciences, material sciences, agri-science, consumer packaged goods. And Pipeline Pilot was the platform of choice for a lot of that. And had an idea, not a not super novel idea, but like integrated design environments for computational chemists and chemists. And we actually built it in Pipeline Pilot very quickly. But at that point, the companies were kind of a little tired of Acceleris, and Schrodinger was building it, uh, going down this path as well. So I went to Schrodinger and we built this tool called Live Design. And that it's taken a while, but that tool now is pretty pervasive in the industry. And then after leaving there, I went to a company called Lab Answer, North American informatics consulting company, and we did very well to the point where Accenture bought us, and I decided to leave and go to AstraZeneca, and I was the global head of R&D IT at AstraZeneca, and then the head of AI and uh, data sciences. But too far away caused issues, being away from my family and things like
Yeah.
that. So I resigned and I started 2015 Visioneers as a faraway consulting, virtual consulting company. And the pandemic hit 2 months later, and we got extremely busy. It was like a perfect storm for us. And then since then, we've added marketing and staffing to our divisional repertoire. And
Yeah.
that's where we're at today. We've got about
In,
30 folks and 40 some 45 contractors around the world.
Interesting. Interesting. Obviously, we've known each other for a while,
Yeah.
but it's quite cool to listen to some of your background as well and listen to some of the stories, some of the bits that I didn't know as well. Um, what Going back to one of the early things you said, what fascinates you about science and then I suppose the kind of pharma world?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mentioned the forensic side of things. I love finding things, whether it's a new molecule or helping find a new molecule, a new medicine, or some sort of criminal killer, you know, whatever that is. I like finding um, the challenge of finding something that takes a lot of hard work and things like that. Hobby wise, uh, metal detecting, going out, it's a big thing in the UK right now. Oh, it has been for quite a while. But, finding that hoard of coins or something somebody dropped years ago. And so I think I know where my sweet spot is of love finding something.
Yeah, I can get that. I don't think I've ever told you this, but my dad actually is a historian. Well, he was a history teacher, then a history lecturer, and then like a historian. And actually, somebody in my family found a big hoard of it was like Roman coins. That was
Yeah.
actually it's actually in the British Museum now, and they were worth quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see the fascination in that type of stuff. It's quite cool.
Yeah, I love history. I love all that stuff. So I'm probably I have too many hobbies and I'd like to do too many things, but it's better than I don't have the personality that wants to put the blinders on and do a very deep dive on one thing. I just know that's not me. So call me ADD, call me whatever, but I'm a little more scattered.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think I'm a
Yeah.
little bit like that myself, so it's absolutely cool. So talk to me a bit about consultancy then, John, because obviously you're running a consultancy company now, largely into the kind of pharma and life science market. What challenges are you seeing out there in the world of pharma at the moment?
Yeah. How long is this? 2 hours, 3 hours? Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, so look, you have two choices. You can hang your shingle and say, this is just going to be me and I'm going to consult around and, pick up gigs and jobs and do those. And can be a very nice lifestyle. I chose a different path. I originally thought I was going to do that, kind of fade away into the sunset over time. And then once I was in it, I was like, nah, it's very my personality. I'm like kind of in it to win it. So I decided that I was going to grow it and turn it into something bigger, um, and not make it a lifestyle company and bring in more people and more personalities and try to make a go with something kind of, similar to the lab answer approach to things that we did years ago. It's a culture first approach, so we take culture very, very seriously, and for good reason. I've lived in many organizations over the years where there wasn't always good culture, People said there was good culture, but there wasn't good culture. Um, and so, yeah, growing this consultancy comes with a lot of challenges. It's you can have sleepless nights. You, if you're not innovative, you can easily go out of business. You have to innovate every day almost, and you have to look for opportunities, and you have to look how to do things maybe differently and more efficiently. Um, and that's part of the divisional growth in marketing and staffing is those exact reasons, right? All types of events have happened in the past 5.5 years since we started this. Invasions, wars, bank failures, companies deciding that they're going to operate differently and maybe squeeze the little guy out, right? And and it's just all types of weird things go on. So you have to be ready for what's around the corner.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you there. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Running your own business compared to working for somebody. Yeah, it is a lot more agile, and yeah, you have to move with things a lot quicker.
Yeah, I would say, maybe even I personally would have behaved differently in a company that I worked for many years ago, knowing what I know now, knowing what a small employer goes through. Maybe, so my advice to people is always put yourself in someone else's shoes and um, try to understand their pain or their needs or their wants or what they're struggling with, right? Because it's always like an iceberg that you see the tip of the iceberg, but you don't see what's underneath the water, unfortunately. And sometimes that's a massive iceberg, and sometimes maybe it's not.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And interesting where you're talking about kind of understanding problems as well. So obviously, like you're an expert with so many kind of years experience in the industry sector, and so the companies that you're kind of working with now as a consultant or as a consultancy, what type of problems are they bringing to your table, obviously without disclosing or breaking any confidence, but kind of what trends are you seeing at the moment where you guys are solving these problems?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of the problems are totally preventable. And honestly, that's what we try to do for our clients sometimes is to point out, hey, a change in culture, whether it's a data culture or behavioral culture, whatever can lead to better adoption of a strategy. And that strategy can lead to better outcomes. It's that simple. But many of our clients are very large clients and they suffer from the largeness of the bigness of their organization. And people come and go, and it creates problems. There's efficiency issues, there's personality issues and stuff like that. But a lot of these, we might be on the third iteration in my career of seeing these problems rear their ugly heads. And um, and so what we try to do is really break things down for them and make them understand like, hey, this all starts because you don't have a scientific data strategy, right? You don't even talk about this. You don't even talk about data culture and culture as an asset or fair principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. Like all these things are part of the symptoms of the disease or part of the problems that you're having. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect it can be simple process improvement, right? Like just truly understanding what's going on in the laboratory. I, I'll even go as far as saying, here's something so simple and so easy that, it's like even a caveman can do it, right? Like even defining what you're working with in an organization is so basic and simple, and yet so many people or organizations don't do it. I'll give you one perfect example. So when we work with a lot of clients, you're in a technology, scientific software environment, And many organizations to this day don't have the simple definition for a minimal viable product, a proof of concept, a pilot, and a production like approach to scientific software. And you would be amazed by not having those defined what people call a pilot and a POC, how they get it all mixed up. And it creates massive problems in an IT organization.
Uh, and so it's quite interesting listening to that. And obviously, in my world, we deal with a lot of probably more focus on the software side and like the tech startups, probably more mainstream, that aren't always in the pharma sector. Some are, but some
Mm-hmm.
aren't, right? And actually, just listening to you there, if some of the people I knew in this world heard that, they'd be kind of disbelieving, I suppose, on that. What is it within the pharma sector that kind of makes that a little bit more prevalent, compared to, I don't know, a tech startup in Silicon Valley?
Um, Science and technology. So the problem is, it's not a problem, it's just reality. You have a lot of smart scientists. Um, there's a difference between smart and brilliant, by the way. Like I've met brilliant people. Like the hair stands up on your arm when you meet certain people. I won't mention any names, but some major heads of technology companies that are now like kind of retired and have their own foundation and stuff like that. You meet them in person, you're like, oh my God, this guy is just knows everything and anything and everything. It's just, um, but it gets in the way of an organization as a whole if you cater to certain people. Like if a say a pharma company hires this hotshot researcher, MD, PhD, whatever, and they come in and they're like given the red carpet and they're given whoever you want, go hire them. Here, we're going to give you this part of the building. Oh, do whatever you want. That culture creates massive problems in a large organization because inevitably that person doesn't stay that long. Let's say 3 to 5 years max, and they move on. And now the organization's left with cleaning it up. It's almost like a crater, in a field that was bombed, right? And there's this crater now that you've got to fill in and fix and make it look right. And so this approach to science, this approach to, oh, this group doesn't have to follow those rules, this, that, there needs to be a set of rules. And the first thing I'm going to get when I talk like this is someone in research is going to give me the stiff arm and say, yeah, but everything we do is different and it's this, it's that. It's like I've done all the studies. It's BS. Even if you do, 100 one-off types of experiments, those still need to be captured. There's so much to learn from that documentation. In today's world with AI, all of that data gets consumed and reused so people can do it better, faster, stronger the next time, right? So there's this whole concept of reproducible experimentation, reproducible science.
Yeah.
And the point I'm trying to make is there needs to be some rules, not overarching rules, but some rules on how an R&D organization does its work, collects its work, documents its work, and then learns from that and actually now in today's world uses AI, machine learning, other things to drive an in silico model first approach to things. Because if your competitor's doing it, they're going to outperform you immediately. And so you
Yeah.
cannot not afford to do that as an R&D organization today. So that's one example.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so again, kind of going into that kind of R&D kind of organization, or even like the unit within an organization. What do you think? So you talked about the piece there, the rules around it, and some of the culture kind of piece. What other mistakes are you seeing? Coming in as an outside consultant within these organisations where people could, are falling down, and definitely, I say people or organisations are falling down where they could make vast improvements.
Um, yeah, ask that one more time. Ask me that question one more time.
Sorry, yeah. So I think where my head was going with that, and I suppose go with it the way that you feel. But I think you were saying that in order to be at the forefront, this is what my I was taking from it, and tell me if I'm wrong. But in order to be at the forefront of the kind of industry, the R&D kind of units within these organisations need to have some rules in place so that
Yeah.
actually the you get collecting all the data so that actually you can use kind of AI and machine learning to actually come up with the best scientific results in there. And if they don't, then they're going to fall behind versus their competitors. So I think the question I was asking is, what else are you seeing as a consultant that they're doing wrong at the moment?
I mean, they're doing a lot of great things. I mean, and a lot of companies have actually said, "Hey, we can't do this massive amount of, diversity. We need to shrink it down and focus on things a little over the time." Like, don't get me wrong. Some of these companies are packed with extremely smart, capable, driven people, and they'll do things right. The problem is sometimes the size of the companies get in the way, the bureaucracy, the hierarchies, the politics. These are all the things that cause issues inside these companies. But the science is unbelievable. Like you look at AstraZeneca today,
Yeah,
you look at Roche, you look at the top pharmas, they're doing incredible science. Um, but they fall short on managing that huge organization and being more efficient versus less efficient and and then adopting new ways of working because it's kind of like painting an airplane while it's flying, and it's going hundreds of miles an hour and you're trying to paint this plane. That's kind of
yeah,
like what it could be, in some of the programs going on in pharma. It's actually the little things along the way, like I mentioned, just simple things like just making sure people are speaking the same language when it comes to defining a process or a term or whatever it might be, or making sure that the complexity, the massive complexity that they're working at is being captured and contextualized as best as you possibly can. And there's not this approach that says, oh, we don't need to do that, or we don't need to document these things. We don't need an electronic lab notebook. We're going to do this and that. And what ends up happening is that scientific method doesn't get captured, and then it's inefficient because
yeah.
a lot of companies will find it's easier to repeat an experiment than it is actually to find it and get the value from it was run the first time. Oh, we'll just repeat it because we can't find the data or we don't have access to it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That does make sense. And interestingly, kind of in different industry sectors, I've definitely heard very similar stories actually of and look, it's the same in our industry as well. Actually, there's a cultural thing of sometimes people, especially when they're quite experienced, of not documenting everything, not documenting processes, not putting the data down, and then it's in somebody's head, and then actually, then being able to repeat that process actually is really difficult. You know,
Yeah.
and we're certainly seeing that across other industry sectors as well. You mentioned AI and kind of like machine learning. Obviously, it's on everybody's kind of lips at the moment, and
Yeah.
clearly, you know, there's been massive progression within kind of the pharma sector. Where do you see it going? Like, what are the trends that you're seeing at the moment?
Um, it's a good question. I mean, I talk about this a lot. I mean, for me, AI is our next super advanced data environment, right? It allows us quick access. It allows us to um, get information out in a way that's much faster. Um, I see it can just continually getting better. And the better that the data gets in the science world, the better the AI is going to be. You got to remember, sometimes 50% of those journal papers and stuff that's been written or captured is not of quality, and so outside of AI, companies have highly curated some of this data very manually over the years, and it comes at great cost. Um, and then having an AI large language model environment sitting on top of this then becomes extremely valuable from an insights perspective, from a use perspective. The bottom line is if you can do something in 5 minutes that would normally take you an hour with quality. um, it it's here to stay, and it's just going to become, part of that adoption curve where more and more people use it and realize what they can get done with their time and accomplish. And I think, that's the world we live in. And what happens next is uh, experimentation, uh, programs, projects, you name it, will be performed to enhance our data environment so that we'll be able to, get more details out of our AI prompting and searching and things like that. So it's here to stay. Jobs will be affected. There's no question, because efficiencies rise. But at the end of the day, humans that want to take advantage of this and make it part of their toolbox are going to excel, and they're going to ask harder questions, and they're going to solve harder problems. And, we're going to see great advances. One thing that's really struck me recently is the whole world of metabolism and um, metabolic disease. A lot of the you've seen with the GLP-1 drugs that have come to market and have allowed people to shed massive amounts of weight, feel better about themselves, get healthy, et cetera, et cetera. This is just the beginning in this space as well. So I can see how this space could evolve and actually affect all the other therapeutic areas out there, because there's a good chance that many of the therapeutic areas are linked to some sort of metabolic disorder. And that drives massive quality of life and health for humans.
Interesting. That is quite interesting. Um, and yeah, obviously we, in the UK as well, we've seen the rise of these type of drugs, and everyone, talking about it, and loads of people are taking it, and so yeah, really, yeah, that is quite interesting. Just dipping back to the job piece on the AI side of things, and look, I, I'm. I know that I'm asking you for like a bit of a crystal ball here, and no one can predict the future. But given your experience, which jobs do you think potentially could be affected by AI within the pharma world? And do you have any kind of, I suppose, idea of new jobs that might come about?
I think anything that requires, data searching or um, documentation, or anything that requires this sometimes a mundane human um, part of collating, bringing things together. Those are either gone or they're going to be gone soon. Um, Anything that requires um, downstream, beyond the primary research that's going on, and again, bringing things together. Um, Going off and trying to search for insights, pulling, being able to bring data together, evaluating and analyzing, all those things will start to go by the wayside. And, you might, as a data scientist or something, set something up to go off and go do. But I think you're going to see, there's this big, huge spike in data science because the truth was the environments were that bad that it was easier to throw people at it than it was to fix the data environments. So what you're going to see is the data science need is going to lessen because AI will be able to go out and do much of the roles that a data science can do. Development, think about writing code, right? If you sit down and figure out how to write these Python scripts or this Python, and it takes you a day, or you go to ChatGPT and you say, hey, write me this Python that does this, and it's done in 10 seconds.
Yeah,
What does that tell you? There's going to be a decrease in developers and development, right? Now, there's always, and this is the point there's always going to be a need for experts and expertise in any of these fields. It's just going to be, it's going to morph how junior people get into it and rise through it, and the need to even hire them, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. It does. It does. And I had somebody explain it to me not too long ago that in a way, I suppose AI is a bit like electricity when it first came, and actually people need to kind of understand how to use it, what the applications will be, and there will be a period of kind of creative use of it, and
Yeah.
actually the kind of the skills that will be needed in the future will be a little bit less of the kind of doing and the mundane, like you talked about, and actually more kind of the creative piece and actually co-piloting it, in a way, and actually using the AI to come up with those creative solutions. So it'll be interesting to see how it changes. I think the development one's an interesting one. That's obviously close to my world as well.
Yeah.
Spoken to a lot of CTOs, CIOs who are trialing kind of AI across development teams and testing, and it's already in most companies. So anybody who thinks that it isn't needs to look again because it is. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it pans out.
Yeah, and I think that's a great analogy. Whoever, you're talking about electricity, it's a great example of where electricity is at today, right? It's in the background. It's kind of part of our lives. It's not thought about that way. But turn electricity off, and what happens? Massive problems, right? People rely their lives depend on electricity. They could die, right? You have people in that are compromised and things like that. So it's one of these things where it's moved humans uh, further away from self-sustainability in a way,
Yeah,
and AI is the exact same thing. It'll move us further away that when and if taken away in the future, it could cause serious problems for humans who rely on it and depend on it every day, even not knowing that they do.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. And so AI, just going in a little bit more into the pharma world, and you'll probably know a lot more about this than I do. But obviously, at the moment, there's a number of, again, without naming any of them, but there's a number, if not a lot of kind of AI startup drug discovery type companies, globally.
Yeah.
Obviously, looking to kind of come up with the magic formula to this. What's your take on this versus the classic, what I call the classic old, giant behemoth kind of farmers versus these kind of tech startups? What are you seeing in that space, and how do you see it maybe unfolding?
Yeah. No, I think it's great. Look, sat on some of their advisory boards and have worked with some of them closely. I think it's great. It reinforces the in silico first, the model first approach to things. What I think some have learned, some are no longer in business, some have been consumed, um, that it's very difficult, right? So what a pharma company might have as an asset, well, they have assets. They have their people, which is a huge top asset, and then they
Yeah,
have their data, which is another top asset. So that combined with a model first approach is very powerful. So what I'm trying to say is this is a very team oriented sport. Like it's the team approach. I call it the ultimate team sport. And that's what wins. So yes, some of these companies can go out and they can do things and they can make major dents and they're chipping away at the big block there of progress. However, we've seen examples where some of them have failed. Our biggest challenge today in pharma is we can make incredible molecules, but they still fail in the clinic at the same, if not the same rate, almost the same rate. And that's the problem. There's still a very large chunk of understanding or misunderstanding when it comes to biology and how things or perform or react in the human body or an animal body, etc. So that's still the biggest challenge, right? Like we can get to the clinic, but the failure rates are still the same. And so what what has to happen is again, multiomics, microbiome work, all types of advances in science to understand biology is going to help improve those chances. But we're not there yet. So even if a in silico first small company does an incredible job of getting those molecules to the clinic, the level of risk is still about the same. But they got there a lot faster. Okay, so
Yeah.
if they can keep doing that, then now you're going to shrink and collapse the time to market, and the molecules that do make it through the clinic. Now you've got a very uh, I won't say fast, but a higher rate of time or lower rate of time to get to that clinic and hopefully get a new drug to market. That's going to
Yeah.
help patients.
Okay. That's quite interesting, actually. And again, I didn't know. Well, I'm learning quite a lot from it. So it's quite interesting, actually. But it's quite an interesting explanation of that. So I'm taking from that there's still a fairly high failure rate with these organisations based on just the likelihood of success.
It's still pretty high. It's very
Yeah.
expensive. It's still one of those areas in the industrialized world where a lot of people get put on to try to make it successful and get it through the process. Um, but yeah, it's still riddled with failure. With
Yeah.
drug discovery is mostly failure,
Yeah.
and the horse racing is mostly failure, right? And you get to these things where um, there's a similarity between different events, discovery or production events in our lives that have similar failure rates.
Yeah. And I find that fascinating, actually. So obviously, you've led quite large teams in large pharmaceutical environments and doing this kind of work. How do you set a team culture up for this, bearing in mind that there's going to be a large kind of failure rate? What's your what's your approach to that?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Like business development has the same, like, a lot of rejection, a lot of failure. Drug discovery, it it's hard, and it actually has to start back in grammar school, right? The education has to start way back then, and people have to be educated early on like what you're getting into, what this mean, why is data so important? Why is it and when you're in an organization, it's not your data, it's the organization's data, right? You're working towards a much bigger cause. And so egos have to get checked, personalities, and that like building a championship team, right? It's no different. You have to have that strong coach who understands the big picture and understands the personalities on the team and how to use them and how to cross the finish line, as a winner. Um, because sometimes, second place doesn't is can be failure.
Yeah.
It could be
Yeah.
second to market, right? And that in some people's eyes, that if it's not showing any differences between the first to market, that could be failure. It might not even get accepted, right? So it's very, very competitive. And I will say, I hope the audience doesn't feel like I busted on researchers too much, because some of them, I've met the most dedicated people in my life who dedicate their life to research and bettering, the world around them and that they live in, and they've given intense and immense hours of their time to further a program, further a drug series or a therapeutic area, whatever it may be. There are true heroes in these companies doing this work every day.
Interesting. No, I did, no, it's really interesting to listen to your thoughts on that. And actually, as I was listening to it, I was thinking it must be quite a pressured environment. Is that fair?
What type of environment?
Like, quite high
A
pressure.
pressure. Oh,
Yeah.
totally. So, I mean, there's stories that I could tell, but I've had, I've had some big jobs out there and, traveled around the world and met people. I've had people in tears telling me that if somebody asks them to spend 5 more minutes on something during that week, from an IT perspective, an informatics perspective, they think they might collapse. Like they're extremely stressed. They're under a lot of pressure to get the work done, get it out the door, get it to the next group, whatever it is. So, absolutely. and again, this is a not everybody handles pressure well, right? You
No,
know,
exactly.
whether you're a
Yeah,
soldier, PTSD, or you're in at work, you have PTSD because you can't cope with that pressure, and you don't know who you are. You don't know that until you're in it sometimes. And we've
yeah,
had conversations about how, putting people in big jobs before they've experienced some of that pressure along the
yeah,
way can be a very, very big mistake, right? So you got to acclimate, just like in any other, again, in life, you got to acclimate to that type of pressure. You can't just, you can't. That's why people go through training, right? Whether it's
yeah.
military training or it's athletic training or whatever, you can't just jump into that without having major consequences on your body and brain.
Yeah, no, I'd 100% agree. And you made an interesting comparison earlier in the conversation a couple of minutes ago about business development being quite similar failure rate to kind of drug discovery
Yeah.
and actually within a business development role. So I've run sales teams my whole life, and actually the pressure in sales roles can be immense, and it can be. And look, if you're running a business or running a business unit, or you're in any high flying job, the pressure can be immense at times, especially when things aren't going wrong, and some people handle it well, other people don't. But I do agree with you that part of that is that, yeah, you can acclimatize to it, as you say. You can gradually over time step through your comfort zone, and you can build up to it. But sometimes it just certain people, it isn't for them.
No, it's and people find out the hard way, James. They find out the
Yeah,
hard way that they wanted, let's just say hypothetically, for the past 5 years, all they wanted to do is get into business development. And then they get into business development in the first 3 months, they can't get out of it fast enough because they
yeah,
realize, oh my gosh, this is not what I want to do. I do not want to spend 8 hours a day trying to reach somebody, contact them, see if they have any interest. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's a hustle, and this goes back to the consulting. The decision to become a larger consulting organization. It's a hustle. No ifs, ands, or buts. And the business development part is very difficult and challenging. And some people are really good at it, others aren't.
yeah,
Um, and you'll see organizations that can easily become sales driven organizations because the revenue um, makes the world go round, keeps the lights on in an organization. You have to bring in revenue in order to pay people,
yeah,
to do bigger and better things, innovate, whatever it may be. You need that money to come in, and if your sales team or your business development team isn't working properly, well, then it's a downstream effect. You're gonna have problems, and so getting that right is critical to a critical part of the organization. And then sometimes people get it right, but then they becomes a sales centric organization for, like, instance, a scientific software company. Then it becomes a very sales driven organization. Their behaviors don't match with the rest of the organization. Compensation plans, the
yeah.
pre-sales team does all the work, the business development team gets all the money. Like, I've heard it all because I've run those groups in my past, right? What I'm trying to say is there's better ways to do it, not the 1990s software model. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? And I spend quite a lot of time talking about this. I run a number of leadership groups. I know a number of consultancy owners. We talk about it a fair bit at Exalto as well. I think you're absolutely right. It's sales is hard, especially in a tough economic environment. It's harder when you're starting something than when you're more established, because it's obviously, well, it's easier to keep a customer than it is to gain a new one if you're doing the right things, and your delivery is great and your customer service is great. And so there is a whole ecosystem to
Yeah.
it. You know, um, getting new logos, as you know, if you're talking kind of SaaS speak, it can be very tricky. And depending on the market you're in, you know, and consulting and recruitment and coaching and stuff is quite a saturated market. So you need to be better and be able to get different types of attention
Right.
than some of the competitors. So it is. I find the whole thing fascinating, really. I think that my number one takeaway in sales though is the resilience needed, and I don't know whether they're, you know, you'll know about this better than I, but whether there's a little bit of a, you know, a parallel or comparison with the scientific side of things, but the people who are in my opinion, they're best at sales. Like, you can have some people who are just great at building relationships, but by and large, the best people are very consistent. They've got really good resilience, and they just don't give up. And actually,
Totally
you know,
agree.
it's a long game. You know, you can
Yeah.
have one great sales call, but it's the people who will pick up the phone or message consistently, day in, day out,
Right.
for years.
You brought up a great point, and now that and you're 100% right. And you could, again, all across walks of life, where you follow a statistic approach to something, or you'll your chances of success are better. I will say, and it's unfortunate that in the R&D space, salespeople get a bad name for two reasons, maybe more than two, but I'll just, one is they're 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 not very ethical how they do things, or they're annoying, they're this or that. But the other part is sometimes the R&D side of the house doesn't understand what a salesperson, what a business development person has to do to be successful in that space. They have a job to do, right? And when they do it well, there's, like you said, they're successful, but sometimes doing it well annoys people, right? The people in that side of the house that don't understand, that can't put themselves in their shoes, and don't understand this full life cycle of the environment that they're in. And so they get a bad rap. And many times, if you're in this R, and I've lived in all sides of the fence, so I've heard people say, "Ah, it's another one of those sales guys coming to bother me," or "It's this or that." There's just this misunderstanding, or rightfully, maybe something happened, like I said before, but there should be a better relationship model between both sides of the house. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I've thought
It's
about this
super
quite a few
interesting.
times. It is really interesting because sales has got a bad rep, full stop. And I think certainly in the UK it's got a very bad rep. I actually think more so in the US it's actually got a better rep slightly. So for example, like in the UK, like estate agents or realtors get horrific kind of rep, and actually recruitment consultants often get a really bad rep as well. But what the thing that most people forget is that you're actually being sold to all the time. So anything that you've bought, you know, whether it's
Correct.
your laptop, whether it's whether it's my coffee mug or whatever it is, we've made a choice to buy that. Now it may be through marketing rather than direct sales, but we've actually been sold to whether we like it or not. And actually, anybody who owns a business understands that sales and marketing, and revenue drive everything, and without it you can't have a business. And so pretty much you say 90% of people usually work for a profit related kind of organization, and actually they've got a job because somebody
Yeah.
sold something to somebody. And actually I think this is the bit that we sometimes forget. It's just seen as a bit of a dirty word sometimes, and actually that they fail to realize that they're being sold to all the time. So my
Exactly.
it's an interesting one. We talk about it within our teams, and my relationship to it is actually I'm very proud to be in a sales type environment. I'm happy with it, and if people don't want to buy our product, that's absolutely fine. But I'm absolutely confident to go and tell people why they should do and why I believe that we're better than other people, and I'm quite happy with it. But it is an interesting thing that people coming into our environment in a sales role sometimes have this relationship with sales, and that it's seen as a bad word, and actually that affects the way that they operate within the business as well. So I don't know,
I
I
totally
find it
agree.
fascinating.
It is fascinating, and I found over the years, 35 years, that the folks that figured out how to embrace that the sales salesperson or the company that's trying to sell to them and work with them and get in the weeds and stuff, they're super successful. Like they, there's you can delineate people on how they approach these relationships, and the ones that give the stiff arm right away and are damning of the sales and the business development. There's other issues there too. There are personality flaws and issues and stuff, and they don't know how to work with people. So, and I can say this confidently because like I said, I've been on all sides of the fence in the past 35 years, and it's even to the point where I've seen people. I'll use the word kind of abuse that BD person or salesperson or whatever. They lose their job then, and then they're like, oh, could you help me? And I'm like, I could and I will because that's kind of who I am. But you weren't very nice
Yeah.
in the past. You didn't treat people well. Your engagements were always very caustic and not good. So, but
Yeah.
just
That and
again,
that's a Yeah, that's an interesting point as well. And I'm a big believer in karma, actually, and just treating people with respect, even if, you know, look, I get plenty of sales calls with things that I don't actually need at the moment, and that's absolutely fine.
yeah,
But, if there is something that I need and somebody can help me with a problem that I've got, then I'll absolutely have a conversation with them as well.
yeah.
And look, there are good ways and bad ways to do sales, and absolutely
I
just
totally agree.
pestering the life out of someone with something that just isn't relevant at all
Right,
obviously isn't going to work. So um,
exactly.
yeah, it is an interesting one. Moving slightly, shifting it slightly into different ways. In in the pharma kind of world, from your experience, and this is a bit with my kind of recruitment, kind of staffing mentality. What do you think's the hardest job to find, or the hardest? What's the toughest skill set to find in pharma?
No, that's a great question. We touched on a lot of things today that make up a personality that, is enduring and effective in a pharma organization. But honestly, maybe because it's close to home for me, somebody that has not only the science side of the house, but the technology side of the house and the IT, the informatics, somebody that brings both sides together. Um, I think is one of the toughest finds today, and again can be very effective because you can actually put yourself in other people's shoes on multiple areas of that organization, and you can effectively broker, negotiate. You could be the conduit. You come up with all these adjectives of how you can be effective and an asset in the organization. And I
Yeah,
think those tend to be difficult ones to find and follow and fill.
yeah, it's interesting actually. I think I say I think I know we get requests for quite a lot of those type of roles. So maybe like a bioinformatician or a cheminformatician. The crossover ones.
But what does that even mean today? So this is the problem. A bioinformatician 20 years ago was somebody who did a bunch of X that had a lot of components to it. But now a bioinformatician could have maybe up to 10 or 12 subtitles, right, of what they're actually doing. And
Yeah,
so it's that in itself. Same with a cheminformatician. We actually have to get in very deep with a client to say, you're looking for somebody, a cheminformatician, but what you have written here, you're looking for a computational chemist or a modeler or this or that. This isn't matching. And so we actually have to go pretty deep with somebody on those roles to really get to what they're going to be happy with.
yeah, and that's an interesting point actually as well. And I think you
I
find this
wrote
in
an
all.
article on the cheminformatician one a couple
Okay,
months ago.
interesting. Yeah, and I'll definitely check that out. And it's quite an interesting one. I think across industry sectors, it's a very similar thing that one role in one organisation is called the same as another role in another organisation, but they're completely different, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that goes back to kind of first principles of good consultancy or recruitment of actually really truly understanding what the requirement is and actually capturing that properly in the first instance, rather than just
Yeah.
going off kind of face
And,
value information.
and a level in one, or this is obvious, but a level in one organization. So a VP at a particular pharma company might be an associate director somewhere else, and vice versa.
Yeah,
Like, people get hung up on titles and stuff like that, but got to be very careful because there may not be any crossover between different organizations and what that title means.
yeah. No, that makes sense. It does make sense, John. Um, you mentioned to me before about the kind of movement towards some of the weight loss. You know, like the Ozempic kind of movement. I'm going to call it that. And obviously that's a trend that you can see in the wider world at the
Yeah,
moment.
right.
What other trends do you think we might likely see in the next year or so in this kind of space?
Oh, the next year or so. Well, I think AI is changing at a rate we've never seen, improving, changing. So that's amazing. Um, if you would have said, 10 or 20 or 50 years from now, that would have been easier to answer because then no one could call me on it. But um, uh, so we're in a slightly weird spot again with economies and where things are going. Um, a couple of us have been following some of the things that are going on. We kind of feel that either come June or early September, we really feel like things are going to take off from an economy perspective. There will be some biomarkers for that. One would be if Ukraine and Russia could end that stupid war, right? So many,
Mm.
I feel so bad for the people that lost their lives on both sides of that war. None of them wanted to be there doing what they're doing. Um, so I should say most. I shouldn't say all. Um, so if we get these changes in the economy due to global events, I think things could really, really take off. Um, I think that um, we will return to this life sciences approach to where there will be a lot of funding again, and innovative companies will be allowed to go out and see what they can get done. But like I said, we're just in this weird pattern right now where some global events have to happen and the consumer and the world confidence changes. And honestly, and in my opinion, these artificial economies that we all live in, they're all artificial, right? I'm, and I don't know anything about what I'm talking about here, right? But I would just say consumer confidence is like one of the most powerful things, like
Yeah,
perception is reality type of thing, right? And I
100%.
think if we could get something there, things will start to return to a better environment for us all.
It's interesting listening to that, and I like your confidence because it is consumer confidence, and I do 100% agree with you that confidence drives everything, right? So, and I've long believed it that at the top of an organisation, people are making decisions inherently. If we are feeling confident as a kind of race, country, business, what have you, we're more likely to look towards the future and invest in that, and actually make decisions that are slightly more towards if you're going to have a scale, towards the risk rather than averse kind of side of things. And certainly for the last 18 to 24 months, my view's been that it's been kind of shut us down. Let's actually watch the pennies, and it's very much kind of how can we save and just really kind of get by rather than invest in the future for most organisations. And actually, a return to consumer confidence kind of globally would really help. I'm a little bit more skeptical, but I think we just live in kind of uncertain times a little bit, and it's tricky to kind of see what will come. But I really hope that you're right, and it'd be great to see that kind of boom time coming again.
Yeah, I mean, literally could talk, when I brought up the metabolic issues and stuff, I've done some research over the past couple weeks, and um, I can say with confidence, we have this problem, at least in the United States, where there's been this blur of politics, um, pseudoscience, uh, greed. You just go down the line that
Yeah,
has created this environment in the U.S. of false narratives and misinformation for the end user or the consumer when it just comes to food and nutrition and quality of
yeah.
life, right?
Oh,
And we this is a 3 hour conversation,
oh yeah, yeah,
but I feel there's too much of this that's gone on, and because it's easy to do, it's easy to confuse people. We talked about like coping skills and other things that
yeah,
you have to learn how to become a critical thinker. And when I'm saying these things, I'm not saying I'm like any of these things, right? I'm just saying that you have to learn how to critically think, be objective, and do work and think through some of these things, but there's so much pressure from a consumerism perspective and a political perspective, a media perspective. Like there's media camps, and it's just it's a sad and it's almost a criminal thing that countries or people are under all this, and they can't get out of it, and they can't see beyond it. So at the end of the day, I mean, Carl Sagan said something about this back in the 90s. It was an incredible, that guy was brilliant. And, he predicted a lot of this misinformation, and he predicted that science wasn't going to be able to stand up during these periods because of the collusion and the clouding of things and stuff like that. So it's just fascinating. But it's unfortunate that some of us have all been caught up in it over the years.
yeah. And again, I think you're absolutely right. This is like another 3 hour conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
The misinformation or the war of misinformation is it's not a new thing, but I think given the world we live in and the access to data and social, it's so easy to confuse it at the moment. And like exactly to your point, I'm no expert on any of this, but the ability to kind of think critically, actually challenge what you're listening to, actually not believing everything that you read, and try and work your way through it is a skill that I think is perhaps being lost a little bit as well. So,
Yeah,
you
it's
let
it's hard to figure out what the truth is about anything, and even to the point where you almost it's almost like uh, avoidance then, because it's like, well, if I can't understand what's the truth in this, what's real, what's not real, why, I'm going to try not to be concerned about it or bother or let it bother me, etc.
yeah,
The whole, I was thinking about it yesterday. We're forced to think in a very binary way. Like it's either that or this, right? There's no in between, right? So it doesn't make sense, right? In the world of politics and all these other things. Oh, it's this party or it's that party, right?
yeah.
And it's like, and and it that's unfortunate because that's not really how life should be, right? It shouldn't be that way, but that's the bubble you get forced into that we're all in, and it creates a lot of problems and issues.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that, and it is. Yeah, I agree with you. We obviously, without going into a political thing, but we're slightly different in the UK. But it's not that binary, but in some respects it can be. So
Yeah,
it's an absolute minefield with it as well. And I'm very I think the older I get, the more likely I am to land. This isn't politics. This is just everything. It's like actually
Right.
you can see both sides to different arguments, and actually, there is a lot more grey out there in reality than a black or white argument in lots of things.
I think too, a lot of people will end up saying the exact same things. There's a 90% overlap, but yet they're on one team versus the other team. So then they're going to have
Yeah.
to agree to disagree. It's just bizarro behavior, but that's what we're forced into these days.
Yeah. It's a shame. It's a shame. So, well, let's hope for everyone's sake that that things move forward a little bit, John.
Oh,
But anyway, look,
it's gonna move forward. It's gonna move forward.
it will move forward. We will keep doing some great things. Listen, thanks very much for joining me today. It's been great chatting to you. Really enjoyed it. Uh, so many great insights. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon, John.
Yep. No, thank you very much for having me. I thought we had a great conversation, and it's great working with you, James. So great job.
No, you too. Thanks, John.